Hey, YouTubers, Tazman here, bringing you another episode of Taz Teaches Java. And so in our last episode, we did a lot with decisions. Now, I forgot to explain one additional one, and I think I can use this guy right here to explain it. Now, this is a completely legal way of doing an if else, if then else if, blah, blah, blah statement. But if you ask me, I really don't like it because the whole concept behind spacing everything, indentation, leaving comments is to make your code more readable. And this, in my opinion, makes it less readable. But if you have a single statement only inside your if clause or your statement here, you do not need to have the open and closing braces. So if we get rid of this guy and 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 this guy, it's a completely legal thing, but I find it kind of hard to read. So if we run this, we'll see that it should run just fine. Errors? Do I have? Oh, I have an error right there because we have our closing if statement right there. Sorry. So if we run this, like I said, it actually runs just fine, and it says good evening because right now it's evening. Remember, we set this one to -263, so it's doing the default. However, in this case, it works just fine, but I find this much harder to read. And if someone later on, or even you, were to say, oh, but I want to do something else in this code, and say something like, I don't know, I equals 10, or whatever else, now the whole thing is no longer legal. It will do this part, and it'll think that it's done here. It doesn't think that there's another else if or an else. So I find it better to actually leave in those brackets, but you can actually use, if it's just a single thing it's doing, you can omit those brackets. And also, we learned when we were talking about operators, the tertiary operator, where you could also, let's just do this and just say, let's just grab this part right here. This is also part of the tertiary one that we learned about in operators. If we were to say set is funny, let's just set it to true. And I don't know how to spell it. T-E-R, tertiary. Let's just say, I don't know. Well, I won't call it anything because I can't think. So we can't use is sunny, but let's say is rainy. Is rainy, and we'll just set that to true. And so what you can do with this one is you can just have your condition. Let's see, how do I want to do this? So we could say rainy, is rainy. We say is rainy, right? We could do that, and then what you can do is just stick a question mark, and then you do your true statement on one side of the between the question mark and a colon, and your false on the other. So we would say S out, and we'd say, let's see, if it is rainy, better stay in, right? And then we could do our other part. Oops. So we could have our colon there. Is that a semicolon? That's a semicolon. I didn't want a semicolon. Then we do a colon. We do S-O-U-T. And we say, go out and have some fun. Yay! So I kind of feel, I think this has to be in parentheses too. Is that right? I feel like there's something I'm missing. I can't think of what it is right now. But if you go watch the operators video, actually we could probably go look at it real quick. Operators. we go into operators real quick, we could do the tertiary was the last one, wasn't it? Ternary, not tertiary. So we have our condition, a question mark, a colon. That is right, isn't it? Our condition, a question mark, a colon. So basically, I'll figure it out. I can't think of it right now because I'm kind of focused on what we want to do. But I will figure this out and let you guys know. But you generally have your condition, whatever it is. Then you have the question mark to say this part on this side of the colon is if it's true, and this one is if it's false. And that's it. That's all you have to do. But this guy is not going to run, and I can't immediately see why. I rarely use these, and I never use these. Let's just say bracketless. So that's why I'm not quite as up to date on those. So what we're going to learn about today is we're going to be getting just a little bit loopy now that we've done that. Oh yeah, we got to get rid of this for this to be valid. And not delete. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to be doing is learning about loops. So those are decisions. They're also named conditional or something like that, I believe. But that's basically if statements. Now loops, there's actually four kinds of loops. But there's three main ones, and then the fourth one is kind of a special one. So let's just talk about this a little bit. When we're doing a loop, basically you have what is called a while loop. Whoa, hold on. That's pretty bad. All right, so where's my pen? Here it is. We have a W-I-L-E, a while, W-H-I-L-E. A while loop. We have one called a do loop. We have one called a for loop. And then we have one called an enhanced for loop. So it's S-E-D, I think, enhanced for. I don't know if I actually spelled that right. So these are our four types of loops. Now, generally, a for loop is also known as a counter loop. And if you couldn't guess from the name of that, it's not like counter like opposite of or, anything like that. That is a counter. So generally, if you know exactly what your beginning number and your end number is going to be for your loop, then a for loop is probably your best bet. And the enhanced for is generally for iterating through an array. So I-A-T-I-N, iterating and then your do and while loops are basically the same thing with the exception of when the condition actually takes place. So a while loop, condition takes place first. So the conditional check, D-I-D-I-O-N, conditional check is first. Oops, first, F-I-R-S-T. And then your conditional check, C-O-N-D. I'm just going to do con check. C-H-E, check is last. Now, a good example of a do loop, because you might be thinking, well, why would I want to check the condition at the very last of the loop? And this is really good for like a play again or a game loop. So basically what happens is you launch a game, you play the game, you get to the end of the game and it asks you, do you want to play again? Or, in like Mario or something, do you want to use another life, come back to life kind of thing. So it wouldn't make sense for me to launch a game and the very first thing that pops up after launching the game says, do you want to play again? Because one, I haven't played yet. And two is, why would have I launched the game if I don't want to play at least once? So this is a really good case for the do loop, where it checks the condition at the last, where a while loop would be, you know, I'm going to do this until you give me the right answer. So I would use a while loop, for example, if I want to say, well, let's say with the do you want to play again, that's the game loop. So if I say yes, it'll restart the entire game loop and go back up to the beginning. However, if, for example, at the end of the game, I have a thing saying, do you want to try again? Hit yes or no. I might have a while loop encasing that so that if I hit Q, it's going to loop back and say, no, do you want to play again? Do you want to play again? Until you actually type in what I told you to do. So the while loop might check for that and keep asking you until you actually get it right, and then it will go ahead and exit. The for loop would be something like, I need to count to 10, you know, and so I could have it print out 10 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the enhance for is good for iterating through arrays. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense for you. Let's go ahead and put back up our Eclipse, and we're going to jump into these types of loops. So just like an if statement, loops can actually be nested, and a lot of times it comes very, very handy to have it nested. Let's go ahead and create a new package, and we'll just call this Loopy. Loopy. And then do a new class, and we'll just call it loops. Like so. Okay, so hit tab, let's type main, and do that, get our main guy up there. And I don't think we're gonna need anything underneath. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our types of loops we just talked about. Let's go ahead and actually look at some examples of these loops. So let's say, for example, we have an array, and loops are great for dealing with arrays. The enhanced loop, for loop, is definitely really good for iterating through the array. And the thing I need to mention there is it's output only. You cannot change values, and you'll understand that as we continue on. But let's go ahead and say really quick, let's say we have a string array. A string array called pets. So string array pets, and we're going to instantly, we've already gone over this, I believe. Whoops, wrong thing. We're going to just assign this. Instead of just give it how big the array is, we're actually going to give it its values. So we're going to say it's a string array, so that means each element inside will be encapsulated in quotes, and I think I hit the insert key. And then we'll go ahead and do that. So let's say our first one will be a dog, right? That's good. Do another one, we'll do a cat maybe. Do that. Let's see. How about a snake? A snake. Comma space. A fish maybe. I think we'll only do one more after this. Or no, we'll do two more. We'll get a fairly decent size array here. So a snake. Let's do maybe a hamster. And what else is another good pet? A frog. People have frogs, or lizard. We do lizard. Oh, whoops, forgot the quote. Lizzard. So now we have all these pets. So with the while and the do and the while loop, we don't necessarily know how many things we're going to go through. So generally you have to set up your own counter. So we're going to actually call one called here. Let's just put it in front of this guy. We'll call it int counter. And we're going to set it to 0. So this is going to be our counter for our while loops. Where in for loops you actually set it up in the condition itself. Let's see. And then let's see. Let's do this our while loop first. And remember, condition is first checked first. All right. So let's go ahead and say while, and this is the format for it. So you have to type WHILE. So you type while, then of course in your parentheses you put your condition, and we're going to say count, which is our variable up here, which is 0, count. I can't say it, C-O-U. So count is less than, whoops, hold shift, and we want the pets array. So we're going to say PETS, and then we're going to use the sub function of the array because it knows it's an array. We're going to use length. This will actually get the whole length of the pets array and put that in that value. So in this case, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now also it's important to know we started this at 0 because even though we're counting saying this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the element numbering on this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there are 5 elements, but we have elements 0 through 4. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so now we have, did I miss? Oh, counter. So here we have our counter. So now all we're going to do is we're going to simply, I don't want to do this. Well, we could output our pets now. We could just say S out, and we could say let's just say S out and then pets, P-E-T-S, and inside we want, because pets is an array, we can't just say pets. We actually have to tell it which element of pets we're outputting. So because we have a counter that's starting at 0, we're just going to put counter in here. And now you'll see that this should give us a list of all our pets. Now it won't be very nice. Actually, let's do print. Maybe we'll do, let's do a plus just to make it a little nicer. We're going to stick a comma and a space. So if we output this now, it's going to loop through all our pets. And we shall see all our pets. So, oh wait, we messed up. Okay, so this is called an endless loop. Because remember, where we have a for loop where it has a definite start and end, we are saying counter equals 0 here, right? And we're saying it's going up to pets.length. The reason we're getting dog, and this goes on, literally will go on forever. This is an infinite loop. It will never stop. And the reason for that is we do not increment counter. We have to tell counter to increase. Other words, it will always be less than the length of the array. So now we have to say counter plus plus. Aha, that should help. Now if we run it, we see dog, cat, snake, hamster, lizard, and lizard has a comma after. Now we could do some fancy stuff with an if statement and say if the element is element number 4 or the last element of the array, do a different out statement without the little comma in it. So instead put a period or something like that. There's lots of things we could do. We could have another statement up here that says print, you know, my pets are, or something like that. That's kind of outside the scope of what we're doing. So here you go is a simple while loop. It's simply going to loop through your thing. Now, very important, once again, with while and do loops, you need to increment the value. Your counter needs to increment, whether it's called I, counter, count, CNT, whatever you want to call it. It has to be incremented manually. So you initialize it here, and if we did not initialize it here, we'd get an error. We're checking our condition here, and then we're incrementing it here. And we'll learn in for loops that all that takes place automatically in the condition parentheses. So maybe it's not quite conditional. So there we go. Now let's say, for example, counter now is actually the value of not 4, but it's actually to 5 because it finished the last one, it incremented to 5, came back up here and says 5 is not less than this. It's false, so it exited the thing. So just to kind of give you an idea, I wanted to we're going to do a do loop. And a do loop is, like I said, just the opposite, where your condition is CHECKE, check last. So let's do this. So with a do loop, we instigate it. It should actually, technically it might even be called a do while loop, because what we do is we say do at the beginning and we begin our loop. Then at the very end of the loop, we type while, and we have our condition, and then we have our semicolon. You do need a semicolon at the end of this. So if we said here, counter, counter is less than pets dot len length. So this is now a valid do while loop. Before we forget, let's go ahead and stick in our counter. So counter plus plus, right? Now in this case, this one will run once, it'll output whatever's in counter, but then it's going to increment counter and it's never going to run again. So if I had a loop here, for example, this is the example of, play again up here. I'm going to say play again, even though you just launched the game, and I'm not going to check it till after I've asked you that. Where if I do it up here and I have a statement out here saying, would you like to play again? I check what your value is. If you said yes, I go ahead and exit. If you said no, I might do something else. And if you typed in a bogus thing, I might loop back and say play again, play again, play again. So this one, in that case, this will not have a counter, because our condition is actually what the input the user is doing is kind of acting like a counter, or the satisfaction or satisfying our condition. So I need a drink. So what I want to do real quick, if I tried doing the same thing here, outputting what's in our array, we're going to error out, because like I said, our array is only 0 through 4, so 5 things long. We're actually on element number 5, which would be out here, and we'll get an error. So if we try and run this, let's go ahead and save it. We will get an array out of length, out of bounds exception, and that's because it's trying to print out an element number 5, which does not exist. So if we wanted to just fix this just a tiny bit, what we could do is decrement counter minus minus, and this will put our elements, so we'll now get lizard again. Let's go ahead, so we have a new line. Let's just do S out. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that, and now you see we got lizard, and then our thing's over. So no matter what, when this guy comes, when this guy gets launched, it's always going to output this thing before it checks if it can output, if it's met its exception. If this one up here would have had the same thing where counter was already set to 5, when this tried running, because pets, since this is, well, if this was 6, then that means when this guy ran, it would actually say, no, I can't run. So it would skip the entire while statement and go on down. Where this one will error out because it's trying to output it before it checks it. If that didn't make sense, let me know in the comments and I will try and clarify it. So the next one we have is a for loop. Yeah, I'll just leave them uppercase. Even though it's all lowercase, it's the beginning of a sentence there in my comment. And this is known as a counter. And what we're going to do, let's see, what should we do with this? Let's go ahead. Let's set ourselves up. How should I do this? let's go ahead and set up another. I'm going to come back up here and just add 2 more arrays. We're going to call one called rows. Oh, whoops, I need to do this. Int rows, int array rows. And this is the other way of doing arrays, is you can actually just specify how many elements there are going to be, and then it'll worry about that later. Whoops, I forgot to do int array. Let me think just for a second. Int array. I think I need to do new int 12. There, yeah. And then we're also going to do one called int. It's an array. We're going to do calls for columns, COLS, and equals new int 12, just like that. So now we have this array right here. This created 2 arrays, and both of them have 12 elements starting at 0, so there's actually 11, but 0 is the zeros place or whatever. What it has is, I'm drawing a blank now, 2 arrays. Each of them have 12 elements. Now, as a default, in Java, it will default all these to be 0 as far as their value goes. In other programming languages, for example, C++, it just says, I'm setting these little spots in a memory aside for an array. What's in them is basically garbage. It could be any value. It could be parts of other code or things that were in memory at some point that no longer are. These should just say that it's not used. So calls and row. Okay. So what I want to do is first I want to give both these things, and we're going to do this simultaneously. So we're going to say 4, and we know the size, so we're going to use our int I. So in the for loop, we're initializing I right here. We're setting it to 0. And we're going to say I is less than ROWS. Now, because both these are the same size, I can do this. If these were different sizes, I'd actually have to do a second loop for the second one. So dot length, and then semicolon, and then we have our incrementer. So as I said, everything is right here in the for condition, the parentheses. Actually, this is the condition itself, but this is the incrementer, and back here we have our, or not our incrementer, our actual condition. This is our initializer, and this is our incrementer. And that's how the for loop works. So what we're going to do is, now you can see this is not highlighted anymore because we're using rows, but we're gonna actually set values to both of these. So actually, do I want to do 1? Let me just think how I want to do this best. 0, 2. I think this is fine. We'll find out. So let's go ahead and we're going to say that ROW rows bracket I bracket equals I. So what this is going to do is assign, actually, because I don't want, for what you don't know what I'm thinking of doing here, but because I want to actually start with 1, I'm going to stick a +1 at the end of this. So even though this is element 0 that we're doing, because it's the first one, it's going to be 0 + 1, which actually puts it to value number 1. So we're in the 0 element space. We're going to put the number 1. And we're going to do the same thing with calls. Calls bracket I bracket equals I and then +1. All right, so what we're doing here is we're actually filling these elements with other values other than 0, because we don't want 0 for what I'm going to do. So this is a for loop. Now, just like the other, like we talked about with if statements and stuff, you can actually nest loops. So we're gonna, for this example, we're gonna go ahead and nest. We're gonna do a nested for loop. And the way we do that is basically we have our for statement, and then inside we have a second for statement. So let's go ahead and just trying to think exactly what I want to do. Oh man, this always takes, we're at 30 minutes already. So let's go ahead and say 4, and we're going to say int I. Now we can actually initialize I a second time, because remember how we talked about scope, and this I is within the scope of this block of code right here. It loses its scope as soon as it exits. Therefore, we can actually have a second one that uses the exact same thing down here. Now, one thing we can't do is in a nested loop, I can't use I within the loop because we're already using I. So let's see, we're going to do I is, so I is less than, and I think we'll just use rows length again. Rows length, since they're both the same length, we're good for that. And then of course we need to increment I, and then we want that. So what we're going to do for this nested loop, instantly we're going to go ahead and start our second loop. 4, and do that, and we're going to use J. A lot of times with counters, I and J are used first. A lot of times when you're using just a quick variable like X, Y, and Z is usually used for your coordinates for X, Y, and Z. X is usually used a lot for just all kinds of things. Actually, we want int J equals 0, comma, or semicolon. Say J is less than rows dot length, not length, length, and do J plus plus. And then we're going to go ahead and do that and hit enter. So here we have our nested loop. So what I want to do is I want to output the value I don't want to do this. Let's go ahead and say, let's do, actually this, technically this could be calls, just to keep it a little more, not clause, that doesn't, just because we're mostly messing with the calls value when we're doing this. This one we're doing them both at the same time, so it really doesn't matter. But this, this is going to influence the calls portion of our array, and this one's going to be the row. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sout or system.out.println, but I don't want the println, I just want it to do a print. And I want to do rows, let's see, how do I want to do you rows, maybe bracket I, and then we're going to times it by calls. So yeah, I think that's what I want to do. Calls, and then we're going to do bracket J. And then I want to do a plus, oh whoops, I did row, not rows. Then I want to do a plus, and we're going to use, I don't remember if we talked about escape characters, but escape characters are used to within strings to do special stuff like tab. There's actually a backspace. There's carriage return and stuff like that. You might have seen in the past we've done a \n for new line. We're going to use one called \t for tab, and I think that's how I want to do that. And then down here, I just simply want to print out a new line, and I want it to be a new line. So just like that. I think that is what we want. So if this is right, what this little chunk of code right here does is will generate us a times table. So let's just see if we're right, if I'm thinking right. It's a lot harder to do when you're thinking this way. It looks 9, 18, 27, 36, 45. It looks about right. Let's take a look at it. So we didn't do a print. Hold on, let's do that real quick. Console. Let's go right here real quick and stick another sout just to give us a new line, because here when we were printing it, we're just printing, we're not doing a print line. So we can just do that. And now let's run it again. And let's go ahead and double click U. So here you have your multiplication table. So as you can see, if I take 12 and I times it by 12, I get 144. If I take 5 times 9, 45. So there you go. That was a pretty quick way of making a multiplication table. So now what I want to show you really quick is we're basically going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with the enhanced for. Now one thing about this you might notice is here we're looking directly at cells. If I wanted to actually assign a new value to a cell, for example, I could say row, this will mess everything up, but I could say rows, comma, let's do rows, comma, I equals, let's do 9. So this will make it so every single row in this thing, anytime it's multiplying, will always be times 9. So I can actually manipulate my array using this one. So now you'll see we get some really bad answers. Let's go ahead, double click that. So you can see like 9 times 1 is that, 9 times 2, 9 times 3, 9 times 4, 9 times 5, so on and so forth. So you can actually see that it's getting correct values. However, it's doing it wrong. It's not getting what we want, right? So we can manipulate our actual array using a for loop. And that's why I wanted to show you that. I mean, we wouldn't want to do that really. But with an enhanced for loop, it's kind of a read-only, so to speak. So if we said with the for enhanced loop, let's do this. For E-N-H-A-N, is it S-E-D? C-E-D, I think. I might have misspelled it on the in Photoshop. That's okay. Enhanced loop. Actually, it's enhanced for loop. So enhanced and for loop. So this is going to be our last thing we're going to do. And I think we'll be done with loops. This is really exciting because next we're going to learn about classes and move on from there. So the enhanced for loop is different in the sense that it doesn't have the same condition. Pretty much everything else is the same. So we say for, and in our condition we say we do initialize it. We say, for example, we say int, and we're going to say row. So this is going to represent a single element in the row, right? And then we use a colon, and then we say what we're getting it from, which is rows. So what this is saying it's going to do is it is going to get a single row or a single element from row, and then it's going to output, or it's going to store in row whatever that value is. It's going to do that automatically until it hits the end of the array. So it's kind of nice because I don't need to know how big the array is or anything like that. I don't have to do this row's length. It just knows that I'm going to do this. The next thing is we want to start our second enhance for, and we just do for, and we say int call. And notice how this is actually different. We're initializing row as an integer. We're not setting it a value because it's going to set the value for us. And notice that this is rows because this is an array of rows. This is just one single row. In the same case, this is one single call from calls. Calls. I cannot type today. And you know what? We're going to do something else in here. We're going to do SOUT just so we know where it separates from, and we're going to even stick in maybe another carriage return in there, just using our escape character new line. So here we go. This is the entire array thing we need for this multi-dimensional, or not multi-dimensional, for this nested loop. And we're going to go ahead and copy that, and we're just going to paste that in there because we are doing the exact same thing. And copy that and paste that in there. So basically this is going to do the exact same thing as this guy, but you'll notice it's a little bit easier to actually write the code for. Oh, and we can't do calls and rows because there is no I, so we just need to say row and call. Now this is exactly why I was saying we can't manipulate, we can't assign something to row and it assigns it to rows, because we're actually just creating a new a variable here and giving it the value of that, which is why this is read only. So if we run this guy now, you'll see we get the exact same multiplication table and it gives us all the exact same values, but it was just a little easier to write with an enhanced for loop. And I think, let's see, I think that's everything I wanted to go over. We're at 41-ish minutes, so I hope you guys really enjoy this. Hope you guys are learning some new stuff, and if you're following along, I was gonna say, I keep forgetting to say, but if you guys are interested, I can actually you know, zip all this stuff up so that you can use it and have the actual exact data that we have here in your Eclipse environment. Or at least, even if you don't use it in your Eclipse environment, it's still, let's see if this will pull up, whoops, right there. Wherever you tell it to use your workspace, bloop, which would be under here, no, not the, this one, I think. I don't remember. I don't remember where oh, actually, I think it's just under this. Is there a workspace in here? I don't know, but wherever you tell it to put your workspace, you can actually find all the files and you can read them without a problem. We could also do this and tell exactly where it is. If we say properties, Tasman, it must have been in there. Tasman WS Eclipse, right? Let's just check once more because I just wanted to show you that real quick. One other thing I wanted to show you is if, for example, you maybe don't have install rights on a system you're on, you can do everything we're doing here in Notepad or Notepad++. So we are in one of these episodes, we're actually going to do some development of a Java program in just Notepad and run it through the command line just to show you how that works. And let's see, so here's Tasman. Did I not see? Maybe it was in here, I just didn't see it. Although this one might not be on the D drive, I can't remember. Let's go here, Tasman. There it is right there. So as you can see, there's the T4zzTeaches. Under source is all our different source. And as you can see here, there's the data types when we're going over data types. Here's the Loopy one right here. We can open it up in my Notepad. We can open it up in Notepad, for example. That's my notes right there. But you can see that it's all the exact same stuff we've been printing out here. This is my actual notes for for what we're doing. So anyway, like I said, hopefully you guys did enjoy this. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below. Aside from that, comment, like, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Check out my Discord and my other channels. A lot of good stuff there. And that's it. Until next time, I'll be seeing you later. Bye.